Greg, thank you for those really kind words, very kind words. And it's such an honor to be here at the Pennsylvania Leadership Conference. And for Fred Anton, I've got to tell you, Fred Anton is all of our mentor, isn't he? You know, chairman of the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association and this statewide business organization representing the interests of manufacturers and business in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. He joined PMA in 1962, and I have to tell you, if I want sage advice, and I need it regularly, I go see Fred Anton. Fred, congratulations for all you do. And how about this really young guy named Dave Taylor, who's the president of PMA? And Dave told me, I couldn't believe it, 20 years he's now been with PMA, and he's just led on so many important pro-growth issues and has rallied so many of us in the State Senate and State House to get real pro-business, pro-growth agenda items done. And he also has a lovely wife, Erica, and a beautiful daughter, Meredith. David, thank you for having me here tonight. To my colleagues, especially those in the House, it's wonderful that there's such a large contingent of us here at the Leadership Conference, because we know our roots, don't we? We know where the base is, and we come back and we want to talk to people to energize us and invigorate us. And to all of you who are on that team, if you could all just stand at once from the State House. I know that a lot of our great friends from the State Senate are here as well, but if all the members from the State House could stand up, we'd greatly appreciate it. As you know, leadership is teamwork. It's definitely teamwork. And I want to tell you, first of all, just a little bit about myself and my family and the balance of politics and family. And then I want to get into two important themes. What is political leadership? You know, what is it? Because there are so many thoughtful people who are not in elected positions, and they provide great insight and great knowledge. But when you're the elected official, the responsibility's on your shoulder. What's it like to get things done? How do you get things done? How do you move an agenda forward? And then secondly, what is a conservative Republican agenda for Pennsylvania? And where should it go? But in starting off about my family, my mom and dad, you know, my mom and dad were first generation born here. Their parents were born abroad. They were immigrants, my grandparents, from Hungary on my dad's side and from Ireland on my mom's side. And hardworking people. Grandfather came over, worked in a steel mill, and saved enough money to start a grocery store. And believe it or not, on my mom's dad came over from Ireland, became a U.S. citizen, and went right back over to Europe, and it's dating me a little bit here, and went over and served for the United States in World War I, in the Army in World War I. My dad served in World War II. And, you know, it's interesting, it's a nation of immigrants, but here's the thing, they wanted to be Americans, right? Like, they were so excited about being Americans. I asked my dad once, I'll never forget, I asked my dad once, hey, Dad, why didn't you ever learn Hungarian? Didn't your parents clearly spoke it? And he goes, I wanted to be American. I spoke English. And my parents were such really good people. My dad was a teacher, my mom homemaker, and then went back to work when we were a little older. It's interesting. I actually, because I think of when we think of conservatives, I'm really proud of our Republican team, but we've got conservative Democrats too that vote our way in independence. And my mom was a lifelong Republican. I come from a mixed marriage. My dad was a Democrat, and he was a lifelong Democrat, but I have to say he was a real Reagan Democrat. Once Reagan came into office on a national level, he was always voting Republican. And just really good people. My wife, Lydia, her mom was actually born in Italy. And Lydia, from a young age, just knew she wanted to be a doctor, and she's a pediatrician. And if there's ever anybody her dad was an auto mechanic, neither of them went to college, but they were like just successful small business people, worked 24/7. And Lydia, they just instilled in her this work ethic, and she knew she was going to be a doctor, and by goodness, that's where she is, and she's an outstanding pediatrician, but also a great, great mom. I've got 3 boys, 18, 17, 14. As you can imagine, it's a pretty lively household. All of them, though, I got to tell you something I think sort of funny is we just talked about politics and the balance of family and politics. Every single one of them, on their own, followed Trump's tweets. Like, it was amazing. I said to Stephen, who's always looking, I said, what are you reading? He goes, I'm reading Trump's tweets. I said, Andrew, do you follow it? He goes, of course. And then I found my 14-year-old, and I said, you got Trump's tweets on your phone? And he goes, yeah, Dad, I follow him every day, all on their own. And my middle one, it was so interesting, had an assortment of Make America Great Again hats in all various colors, and none of us were allowed to touch them because we were going to bend them. Only Stephen could wear them. It was interesting. They were there well before me, and I was blessed to become a delegate to the convention. And I was originally for Senator Rubio, but I have to say, I could tell there was something going on with now President Trump. My in-laws, my sister who's a nurse, my brother who was a teacher, they were there like, I'm for Trump. And you know, this sense of America and Americans being left behind with respect to family-sustaining jobs, and the notion that people didn't have the same opportunities, and that the trade policies and the tax policies, you know, it may have benefited Wall Street to a large extent, but it wasn't benefiting them. And you know, candidate Trump understood that. He also understood that we needed to be able to revive, and I think it's fitting that we're at the leadership conference, you know, sponsored by the Manufacturers Association, that we needed to revive energy development and energy independence and manufacturing and good family sustaining jobs in this country. And I think people were like bought right in. And I have to tell you, I became more and more of a fan. And as I went up to the convention, I'm from Western Pennsylvania, suburbs of Pittsburgh, north suburbs. It's only an hour-and-a-half drive up to Cleveland. I would go up every night, listen to the speeches, energized by the team, and I'd spend the night, wake up in the morning, come home, do some work, take up another kid. Lydia came up one night, and I felt like there was something there. I wasn't sure, but I felt like there was something there. And now we have the presidency and Congress, and 121 seats in the state house, and I believe 34 in the state senate. No, we still got that guy Wolf over there. A little bit, the governor's a little bit of an impediment, but we should be moving an agenda, and I'm going to talk about that here shortly. I just want to say that, you know, when you talk about your position, and I'm going to move it a little bit into leadership shortly. When you're speaker, and I was majority leader before this, you know, you got to gather around the troops to move legislation forward. People, you know, we're all elected by the same 65,000 people, 203 of us, 121 of us Republicans, but we're all elected by bosses back home that we have to respond to. So, you know, you think about how can you get everybody going in the same direction. I have to say that sometimes I think my experiences with my kids can be kind of helpful. I'm not sure in the role of speaker, I'm not sure. But I want to give you one little story about my middle one, Stephen, pretty typical middle kid, loves baseball. And we were, during the holiday break, midterms were coming up, and I saw him sitting around a lot, not getting homework done. So I said, come on, we're going to start studying, and we're going to do this every night. One night he wasn't, like, he just was not prepared. And I said to him, Stephen, like, come on, sit down and let's get it. And he got so upset with me, and he goes, you know, I don't like you. And I said, what? Like, what? I'm here sitting here helping you do homework. And he goes, all you talk about is grades. That's it. All you ever do is talk about grades and academics, and I got to do better. What kind of a dad are you? I thought, well, I think I'm doing a pretty good job. So sit down and let's get back to the grades. And then he liked to give you that little zing as you're balancing your job and academics. He said, you know, Dad, here's what I think you ought to do. Go back to Harrisburg and work on that liquor privatization bill. Oh, independence starts early. You can imagine like dealing with sometimes with my professional colleagues to move forward. But we actually have a great team, and we've done so many good pro-growth items. Holding off the Wolf tax increases. You know he wanted to increase taxes by $13 billion, right, in over 2 years, and when he came in that first budget address, and then told us to go find other jobs, right, in the next budget address. Was going to increase spending, what was it, over 10% or something like that. But we held tough. And we said, no, we're going to live within our means, and we're going to hold you off. And we passed a balanced budget in June. He vetoed it, of $215. We sent him a balanced budget in September, $215. He vetoed it. After a little turmoil, because people, I think, were about ready to cave, but we sent him another budget in December of 2016, and he had to sign most of it, but he blue-lined it. He vetoed a good bit of it. And finally, in March, a budget that spent about $1 billion less was passed, and you know what, Greg? He blinked. And we stayed true to where we were. In addition to boxing the governor in on getting some level of privatization, wine being sold in the private sector stores and direct shipment, I also want to say under the 4 years under Governor Corbett, I think that we didn't get enough credit for what really got accomplished. I think an awful lot of good stuff got done, and it didn't get stated. But we did 4 budgets on time under the rate of inflation without increasing taxes. Now, how about a round of applause for that? We did workers' compensation reform, unemployment compensation reform, tort reform. We in fact, eliminated, finally, we kept it on course, 2 of the business taxes, capital stock and franchise tax. We did pro-life legislation, 2 bills, significant bills. Pro-life legislation was signed into law. A pro-Second Amendment bill, including, getting the Castle Doctrine done, as you well know, important. And we made it clear that the development of natural gas was actually a good thing and created jobs all across the Commonwealth and held off the punitive approach that many wanted. Now, leadership then, I think you gotta show leadership by your actions, and you gotta stake out a position, and you can't be afraid of your position. You can't be apologetic about your position. You have to know your facts, and you have to do research, because you're going to lose on emotion sometimes, but you can't lose on facts and rational arguments. So you got to know it better than anybody, and you got to stand up for your perspective, and you got to be willing to go out and sell it, evangelize. You got to be willing to go out and hold press conferences and go recruit allies and get people a part of the communication of what your position is. And I had a great friend who's now a judge that I served with who said, Mike, here's what I think, and I think this about the folks that really lead. He said, you can't negotiate if you don't know what you stand for in the first place. And it's true. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not give and take, because this is governance. You got to get things done. But you got to know where you stand in the first place. And in the end, sometimes you have to recognize, and you got to hold the line, hold the line, hold the line. But sometimes you got to close, because if you get that incremental win, you change the chessboard, and you can't let the perfect get in the way of the good sometimes, and that's crucial. You don't want to concede moral ground, because you do have a moral fiber or a moral background with respect to the positions that we hold. And when you're going to take on the other side, when you're going to take them on, don't be afraid. Be respectful, but be firm and go back at it. Don't be pushed into a corner and cower, because then everybody thinks you've lost. Everybody thinks you're not really for what you're for. And I think those things are important when you're going to lead. And talking about conservatism, I want to just cover this. I know in a great conservative group like this, a lot of the young people might not know a guy named Russell Kirk. But as many of you do know, he wrote The Conservative Mind. and it's his 100th birthday anniversary of this good man. And he was the one that said that, the far left operates on impulse. Conservatives are driven by ideas. And the conservative beliefs encompass so many aspects of public life about long-standing values, and a respect for a market economy, respect for family, and respect for the dignity of the individual. And those are really key things. I wonder, do any of you ever ask yourself, when did I know I was a conservative? Do you ask yourself, because as you're growing up, you get, oh my goodness, look all around in academia, in the media, you're just indoctrinated with the far left thinking. And it's so easy to fall into it. It's schools a lot of times and in your communities. It's just, how do you find it yourselves? And I have to say, for a person at my age, probably not true for the young folks here, but was confronting communism and being from an Eastern European background in Hungary, just the notion that the state could control your entire life. And I always tell people, read Animal Farm, right? Read Animal Farm, that'll give you a good sense of it. But it was that notion of how they suppressed people and suppressed religion and suppressed speech, and that you could be arrested at any time, and that you could be thrown into a court of law without ever really knowing the charges against you. It sounds like it's so far-fetched, but America's only been around for, a little over 200 years, right? Anybody who thinks that the totalitarian mindset could not return, or that it's not always just coming at you, you would be mistaken. And that's why really events like this are so crucial. That's when I knew I was a conservative. The other thing that I have to say, the Justice Clarence Thomas hearings really solidified for me, because that individual was there, and he was an independent thinker, and he was being criticized because he didn't think a particular way, and he stood his ground. He stood his ground, and I thought, oh my goodness, now there's a person with courage. And my goodness, he's been a great Supreme Court justice. And finally, with respect to a market economy and how good a market economy is, read Michael Novak's The Spirit of Democratic Capitalism. Michael Novak grew up a Democrat in Johnstown, and he came to understand the moral clarity in being able to have that creative dynamic in a capitalistic society and a market economy. And I would recommend it to any of you, particularly many of you who come from an ethnic Catholic background will be able to step in, because a lot of those of us grew up in Democratic backgrounds and came to see what a conservative agenda really helped each and every person. Now with respect to what is a conservative agenda in Pennsylvania, let me first just take the budget. What's it look like? The truth is, it's really not that complicated. You know what I mean? It's live within your means, right? Remember that you're fiduciary stewards of other people's money. Yes, you've got to do priorities. Government serves a role, but by and large, hold the line on taxes and keep fighting for limited government, because it will reduce your expenditures and get out of the business of things you shouldn't be in, like the sale of wine and spirits, for example. Get out of that. And it's interesting. Governor Wolf recently said that, he took a different tenor, right, a different approach for this budget. And he said that it contains no new broad-based tax increases, although he's looking for another $1 billion in taxes, as I understand it. And then he said there were like $2 billion in cuts. I don't know. I went through the budget. There's the same $380 million that they always cut that some of the legislators like to put in on a regular basis. That's there. There's a lot of shifting. But I'm still looking, and I haven't found $2 billion in cuts. It's a budget that's an increase of about $900 million over last year's spend, and it certainly is not as maybe over the top as the last two, but that's because we saw what the other two were, and I think we've all now said, oh, you know, that's bad, but it's not that bad. So we still have to really be playing defense here with what the governor's put on the table. And one tax I'm going to call on, how's this? He's out there taking on the House Republicans and President Trump for wanting to replace and repeal Obamacare, and yet he's advocating a tax on your health insurance premiums that are going to get passed on to increase your expense for health insurance coverage. That really is making a lot of sense to me. And it's already increased because of Obamacare, 32% for employers, 32% in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Strikes me as a little hypocritical. That's what I would say. Hey, how about debt? Boy, now that's not a topic that often gets a lot of coverage. But we got a lot of debt. Under Governor Rendell, not only did he increase spending by about 50% over those 8 years when the rate of inflation was just over 20%, but he increased our debt service by over 50% during that period of time. In 2004, our capital facilities debt obligation was about $6.89 billion. Last year, that number ballooned to $12.57 billion, an 82% increase in those dozen years. 3 times the rate of inflation, most of it all occurring under the Rendell administration. And, you know, in 2004, the debt service was about under $800 million. Last year, it was $1.32 billion. And there's a lot of places that $1.32 billion could have gone on an annual basis in our budget, a lot of places, even reducing taxes maybe, but certainly could have gone to core government functions. Under Rendell, this program called RCAP was increased 5 separate times. And I will tell you, we reduced it once under Corbett by $600 million, that bonding, and we're about to do it again, and we're going to get it on the governor's desk because we're going to continue to push downwards on what our debt is, not upwards. To my Senate colleagues and to my colleague and friend, the Majority Leader Dave Reed, many of us have worked on. We gotta deal with public pensions, right? It's just like it has to happen. Just think about it. If we would have done it 15 years ago, if we would have done it, where we'd be sitting today in a much better position. But the 2 largest pension systems, they're not sustainable. They're not. Now we've passed some bills. The governor vetoed one in June of 2015. You may forget that. He likes to not remind us about that. That we actually did find the votes for a product that we put on the governor's desk to change the pension system for new hires. But the fact of the matter is we have an unfunded liability about $60 billion with a B. And for public school districts, they devote about 30% of their payroll costs for retirement benefits. At a certain point, you got to turn the spigot. The private sector has been in the defined contribution space since the mid-90s. Pennsylvania has to do the same. States all across the nation have to do the same. Municipalities have to do the same. We do not want to become Detroit. And we need to get another bill on the governor's desk. Yes, it might be a hybrid type. I would prefer a full defined contribution plan, I must tell you. I will put it on the governor's desk, and I think he's going to have a hard time vetoing it. That's what I think. And we got to get that done here shortly. With respect to reducing the size of government, sometimes you got to lead by example. I know that it's not completely uniform in our own caucus, but you know we did on a number of occasions, 3 separate sessions, pass a bill which would be a constitutional amendment to reduce the size of the legislature from 203 members to 153 members. And last year, the Senate actually took up our bill for the House, not for the Senate, that to go from 203 to 151 in this go-round, to 151. We need to do that again in this session, and then, of course, if it's passed by both chambers, will go to the voters. And it's leading by example. With respect to the privatization, it will bring in additional revenue. It is the most preeminent example of limited government, the most preeminent. There's others. There's a lot of other things we shouldn't be in. But, you know, we passed full privatization 4 times in the House, even once under Governor Corbett. It did not get done over in the other chamber, but when we finally got together in June of 2015, and Wolf promptly vetoed it, And we're going to continue to move forward because that wall has been pierced, and we need to bring in the revenues based on increased taxes to the Commonwealth, and we need to show that we, in fact, can get out of areas where government shouldn't be. Paycheck protection, Senator Wagner and others, Brian Cutler, where's Brian Cutler? Right here, our whip, Eli Ivankovich. These individuals have led on this issue. And it's kind of a pretty simple good government approach. Government ought not to be collecting political union dues from employees in state government. They ought to be remitting that on their own, outside. I mean, look, we had Bonusgate based on that, right? Why are we entangling government? The Senate has, in fact, taken an important step, passed that bill. It's over in the House. We got to get it on the governor's desk. And I'm going to tell you, I think the governor's going to have to think long and hard about that good government bill. It is good government. And I do have to talk about an area, just two other areas that I think are important. There's a lot of other areas that are important, but two that I'd like to mention. School choice. Look, my dad was a public school teacher. My brother's a public school teacher. Public schools are good. A lot of good public schools. I've got two in public schools, an outstanding school district, and they do great work. But I have one in Catholic school. I can afford it. My wife and I can afford it. And it's a choice we made. And he's getting a great education, too. One size does not fit all. One size does not fit all. And just two things I think that are important on the school choice front. Under Governor Ridge, we did educational improvement tax credits, and then we, under Governor Corbett, created the Opportunity Scholarship Tax Credit. We increased that last year under Governor Wolf. We kind of boxed people in by another $25 million annually. So think about this. K through 12, we're spending over $11 billion, right? Over $11 billion, B. And we increased the program for EITC and OSTC, which allows businesses to provide scholarships to families that want to go to, private schools and even some after-school public school programs. We increased it by $150 million to $175 million. Now, please, it's like it's about 1.5% of what we're spending on public schools. We need to do more. We passed a bill in the House already that is over in the Senate that increases that by another $75 million. And with respect to charter schools, the charter schools prior to 2014, Philadelphia had seen no new charter school approvals in 7 years. 7 years. Even despite the fact that 40,000 kids were on waiting lists for those better schools. So the Philadelphia School District comes in and they want an increase in their cigarette tax. Well, here's the thing. Governor Corbett wanted it, but here's what we did in the House. We said, okay, we'll do it. We'll get the votes. But you're going to have a formal charter application process and appeal process. And since doing that in 2015, 13 new charter schools have been approved. It was my amendment. I'm very, very proud of that. And it's serving 7,300 new kids in charter schools, and they want that. And here's the thing. There's still 25,000 kids that want to get into charter schools in Philadelphia, let alone in other places across the state. I would invite you to go to places like KIPP, whose alumni graduate from college at 4 times the rate of their peers, or to Mass Charter School, which has a 100% graduation rate, and over 7,000 parents on the wait list. And I myself have been to a number of them, but go see the boys' Latin school. There was one young man who dropped out, and you know what? He fought to get back in. And I'll never forget asking him, I said, what are the kids back in your neighborhood? And he goes, they're kind of jealous. Playing basketball, and he's getting a great education, and he's going to college, and he's focused in on the sciences. And I'm telling you, there has to be choice because it's making a difference in children's lives. And finally, on a conservative agenda, Ben, I think your point about the pro-life issue was so right on point and poignant. we're about pro-life. It's because we believe in the dignity of every person from the womb to the grave. That's where we are. And that doesn't mean that we're not respecting women. In fact, we care deeply about women because we care about the dignity and the sanctity of their lives in addition to the babies that they're carrying. And where's Kathy Rapp? That great lady's a leader on the pro-life issue. We love you, Kathy. Thank you very, very much. In 2011, following the really disturbing, that's an understatement, grand jury findings in the Gosnell abortion clinic matter, you all know the story, we passed Act 122, which contained reforms to the licensing, monitoring, inspection of abortion facilities. Common sense approach. We held them to the same standards that we hold hospitals and other surgical facilities. And believe it or not, 5 abortion facilities have actually had to close because they were not providing the same level of important care to the moms and to those babies that are born alive. And I have to also say, last session, we passed Representative Kathy Rapp's bill, a bill that completely in accordance with the Supreme Court cases. We said that, maybe life ought to be protected instead of at 24 weeks by moving it up to 20 weeks. Viability's the issue that the courts have outlined. And in addition, the fetal pain can be felt by that unborn child. That bill passed the House, I think, with 132 votes. It did not get over the goal line, but the Senate started off this session by sending a very similar version back to us. And again, we're trying to bring people together. As you may know, in 2015, let me make sure I get this right. Think about this. Just want to get this number. There were, in last year we have figures for 31,800 abortions in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. 380 were performed after the 20 weeks. That's a common sense bill that's trying to get us in the right direction to really show the dignity for each and every child. These are things that are so important, I think, to all of us. If we do not work together, we can't get it done. Leadership, political leadership, really is teamwork. You have to be rowing in the same direction. You can't always get every part of any bill in your way. You've got to bring people in. You can't push people out. And there's an opportunity for real change. I've been so blessed with the opportunity to be majority leader and to be speaker of the Republican, with the Republicans in charge. But I want you to know, we reach out to colleagues on the other side of the aisle all the time, and we find that a lot of them are willing to support the bills we're putting on because they think similarly. It's not always a party divide. We can move Pennsylvania forward. You can take a far left agenda like Governor Wolf, or you can move a common sense right of center agenda and make a positive difference in every Pennsylvanian's life. That's what we got to do. With that, let me close by thanking each and every one of you for taking the time to be at this conference and to be so committed to making a positive difference in the lives of Pennsylvanians and in Americans. I honestly think that if people reflect on things, that a Republican conservative agenda is what's best for Pennsylvania, and each and every one of you is a leader in getting that done. Thank you very, very much for having me here today.